Hello, in this video I will explain how these new grid supports in Lychee Slicer are working. They have been introduced in version 6. Then it's a new system to prepare your 3D model and to create your supports. Whether you are using manual supports or automatic support. It means that it will be interesting for beginners who are perhaps using the magic features and then automatic support, or advanced users on the other side of the spectrum who want to really master having a full control on what they are doing, the way they are preparing their 3D models. And this new system can be used in addition to the original system for supports, meaning that you can mix both of them, which can be interesting for some usages, or of course you can use just one. You will see over the time that the more you use the grid system, the less you will want to come back to the original system. Also, these new grid supports are only for the pro user of Lychee Slicer. The free users still have access to the regular supports. Then in this video, I will try to cover a lot of things, really the basic features around the grid supports, the way to use them, the access, and of course the basic settings. And I will go to tiny details, some tips and tricks, which hopefully will help you to really understand the way they're working and of course having an easy start using this new functionality. Before starting explaining how to use this grid support, this is very important to understand why there is this grid support. One of the main benefits is to provide a better structure, a better connection between all the supports using the bracing, which will give a lot of stability to your 3D print. When you are creating, let's say, a miniatures, a very small print, I would say you may not have a lot of forces applied to your model, but the bigger, the taller will be your model, the higher will be the risk of having your model moving slightly during the pinning process and so on. Then this grid support, because they are connected all together, bring a lot of stability. And then another benefit is to have a better visibility. You see, if I'm just going on the side, mainly on the front of the view right now, you see that everything is well organized. And the last benefit is you will have less supports, perhaps more bracing, but a total of less supports, and you can save on resin, which of course, the bigger your print will be, the more you will save on resin. Okay, now it's time to see how these grid supports are working in Lychee Slicer. Then for that, I just loaded from the library the chicken of Lychee Slicer, and I just slightly, of course, lift my model to be sure it won't be directly on the grid, and tilted slightly my model. The grid support are located in the support tool. Then you go in the prepare workspace, support tool, and on the bottom area of the right panel, you have the automatic section like before, but you have this new structure tab there when you can find all the parameters for the grid supports and some other parameters. Before, in the manual section, you had the bracing and parenting. Now it's located in the structure section. In fact, of course, the parenting and bracing are used to make the support structure, of course, stronger or more optimized. In the manual section, you will find, of course, basic tool for the manual support, but also the support painting like before, inline support, and supports projection, island detector, and proximity, same as before. Then let me go back to the structure tab. There you will find the snap on grid, which will enable the grid supports. And below the grid interval, you will see that later, search for ground, which was like before. The search for ground feature is in fact the distance between the tip of your support and finding the ground on the horizontal distance. Then if after this 25 millimeters, there is no way to reach the ground, the support will snap on the 3D model. Then having this value, you can increase it to try to find the ground, but it may create weaker support. And that's why default value is a great value. Sorry, this is off topic, but a lot of people don't know what is this search for ground value. Anyway, support parenting, support bracing just below, like I said a few seconds ago. Let me first select the model. I click now on Snap on Grid, and my model, the selected model, have the grid support enabled. It means that each 3D model on your 3D scene can have or not the grid supports enabled. Then I'm on, and you see I'm hovering the grid interval value, which is, and you see the grid appears below my model on the ground, on the build plates. And this grid interval, this is a distance for each segment, I will say, of the grid. And this small cross, we call them nodes, and the support will try to connect to the nodes directly. If you decrease the value, you will increase the density of your grid. You see that each cross are closer to each other, and obviously if you increase your value, you will lower the density of your grid. I strongly suggest to stay at 5, to keep this 5mm value, which will work most of the time. Okay, before going into adding the support, just notice that my default settings, I changed these settings, at least for me. Now the diameter for my support is at 0.9, while by default in Lychee Slicer, this is 1.3 millimeters. Then if your grid is at 5 millimeters, if you have thick, I would say, diameters for your support, I mean large value than thick support, sorry, you may have very, very close support, and it may be quite dense and using perhaps too much resin. Then feel free to perhaps go to a lower value around 1 millimeter. Then 1 millimeter, your space of 5 millimeters, 1 millimeters, and so on. Then I'm on my model, and if I'm hovering, let's say, my model, you see that the support appear and it will snap to the ground on multiple positions. This one, there, oh, doesn't go to the ground, it goes to the other support. Yes, because each time you add a support, it will try to snap directly to a node on the grid, but if there is already a support there, it will just parent to the support. If I'm going there, you see that another support has been created, located on another node. Let me just hover the interval. You see right now this is on a node. Let me add there and there. You see it will snap each time to this grid. This is something very important to keep in mind, meaning that if I'm adding more support, like there, the closest node is where this support already exists, then it will go there directly. And that's why this is very important to consider and to keep in mind this structure. That's why sometimes you have this type of zigzag on the supports, because the base there, the base, I would say the base segment is going as high as possible for the grid, and then it will try to keep the distance, the length of your tip, which is for me 3 millimeters. That's why sometimes you see the zigzag, but it will keep a strong structure anyway. Based on that, if you add more support, you see directly it will snap like that on the grid. Another thing which is very important is, okay, my model is selected, all my support are there, and if you change now the density of your grid by lowering this grid, let's say to 3 millimeters, you see all the support have been updated to snap to this new value of the grid. Or let me do the opposite. Let me increase perhaps to 7 millimeters, and you see it will try to snap as much as possible like that. And obviously, the less dense will be your grid, the stronger will be the parenting. And feel free to, if you want, click and drag like that the bases of your model to snap to another node of the grid. Of course, 9 millimeters, this is quite high. Let me go back to 5 millimeters, and it has been updated. Okay, you see this is really the basic about the grid support. It's just snap a support to a grid and nothing else. Of course, it's more than nothing else, but just a foundation. Now let me remove all of these supports, and if you are not, like me, a fan of the manual support, but you prefer using the automatic support, no problem, it will work the same way. You need first to enable the grid support, which is enabled right now. Let me go back to auto for the automatic support. Let me just remove the auto lift because my model is not anymore on the ground, and I will generate automatic supports. And after a few seconds, my supports are there, and all the grid supports, all the support have been snapped to the grid, and also a little bit of bracing has been added to my 3D model. Then this is really easy. It means that if you are not, let's say, very used about that, if you are using the magic functionality in Lychee Slicer, you can choose the auto orientation, auto support, and then also choosing if you want to use directly the grid support. Then if you go back in layout, you don't even have access to the parameters. the magic button, you can click on enable and you can start your operation. Let me just remove the auto orientation. I'm using, let's say, the light support as an example, bracing, raft, and so on. Feeling lucky. And now it's done. You just need to go in export section and then slicing your model, sending that to the printer, and it's done. You see, easy. And because of this grid support, it's now way more stronger than before with less support. Okay, now it's time to speak a little bit more about creating manual support using the grid supports. I have on screen this model from Fortismint, and we will look about some functionality with the grid support. Let me just enable the grid support. I stay with my 5mm grid interval. And now, if I want to use, let's say, the support painting, you know, this click and drag like that, grid support obviously are working with this functionality. You have directly in the manual section support painting, which is on by default with the interval distance, the angles and all of that. But what I mean is all of this functionality to create the support in Lychee Slicer are compatible. If you want to create quicker your support by using support projection, same thing. You select your area, you can paint your polygons, or for me using surface creasing, preview of support, which is quite dense there. Let me switch to the border section. Why not using the double border like this, interval slightly bigger like that, and the infill, same, 2mm, this is quite big, let's say 5mm, or let's say 4 like that. Adding my supports, and you'll see directly all my support have been created with the support projection. Everything working exactly as before. You want to use the inline support, first click, pressing the shift key, second click, and you have all your support creating using the grid support, snapping on the grid directly. Then there is no difference compared to before. This is why it's interesting, because this is the same workflow, but now it will snap directly on the grid. Okay, now let's say that you created your support here with support painting on your base. But if you leave your support like that, the problem is it may lead to a failed print, because very tall supports, if there is no connection between support, no bracing, it may move, generate deformation in your 3D model, or like I said, it just lead to failed print. Multiple times I saw online on social medias, people sharing photos of failed print with, let's say, a big base and very tall support which are just alone, not connecting to anything. Then this is very important to give some strength to all your support. That's why the bracing are very useful. Then, since this new version of Lychee Slicer, version 6, with the new grid support, you have also a new bracing algorithm. In the structure tab, you have at the end the bracing for your 3D models with multiple presets. By default, you have a small object preset, or tall object, strong bracing, which to be sure it will not move at all, or the default bracing preset. For now, let's just keep this preset like they are, and I will use the default bracing one. I click on Add Update Bracing, and you see very quickly all my bracing has been added. And as you can see, now I have multiple bracing added all together. And for some reason, if you want to connect to support like this one and this one, which are quite far if you look at the grid, no problem, click on Add Update, and some extra bracing have been added. And for some reason, if you want to give more strength, or let's say, this is quite a line there and I want to add some stability on the side, no problem as well. You can create what we call a cathedral, which is a reinforcement for the bracing. You can press the Alt key, and you see, if you hover there, it will create not really a new support by itself connect to the model, but a kind of support which supports the support itself. Then this extra support, it's selected, you can click on Add Update, and automatically some bracing has been added. Then this is a way to create some extra support. Let's say this one, I'm pressing the Alt key, I'll double click on it, and now click on Update, and you see the angle has been added. Then automatically it will work most of the time perfectly the way you would like to have your bracing done. But if you want to have more control, you want to give more strength to your bracing, especially for very tall, big models, like say you print on the Frozen Mega 8K or 8KS or the Jupiter, all these big printers or Apex Maker X1, it's very strongly advised to add more supports, having a better stability for your model. Then bracing is really something great, and as you can see, this is quite organized with a very, very organized structure. Now let's talk about another behavior about the bracing. As you can see, I have three supports, two which are, let's say, tall but not that tall, and one which is very, very tall compared to the others. And if I'm running now the bracing tool, as you can see, I have two different behaviors. The small one, an extra bracing has been added just to give more strength and more stability, but the taller one have an extra bracing, which is more a triangular shape, meaning that because this is very tall, it's the risk of bending or slightly moving during the printing process. Then adding an extra support, in fact, this reinforcement will give more stability to your 3D model. That's why, depending on the support you have, you may see this extra support, in fact reinforcement, which can be added, one or two, depending on the height, how tall is your support. Still about the bracing, now let's talk about how to create your own presets. You have, like I said before, multiple presets, but for some reason you may want to have the control on your own bracing. This is quite easy. You go in the bracing section, and in the preset you can click on add new preset. Let me name that demo. Okay, and you are now in a specific editor where you have, let's say, almost the full control on your bracing. If you look at the parameters, you have there the main tab, which is global, and you have top, middle, and bottom, which are gray out. I will come back to that later. And you have these preview of not support but the bracing in white, and you can change some parameters. I won't explain all of them. Let's say you have the gap. The gap is, you see, the spacing between each part of the supports. Let me just remove that to go to 0. You have the bottom start. Bottom start is at which distance from the ground your support will start. Then by default this is 1. You can say, I don't know, 4, and you see all your bracing are moving up like that. Then feel free to edit these parameters and play with them. And what is important is more the pattern type. You have the double diagonal, which is the current one, a lot of bracing, which is quite dense. If you switch to a single diagonal, you see it's more kind of zigzag and less dense. This is a one by default. And if you switch to the mix, and now you see that the tabs on top there now are available, this is a mix of single or double diagonal based on the position. You see that on top I have a double diagonal, in the middle I have a single diagonal, and on the bottom a double one. Then you can choose if you want to have a lot of control or something which is quite simple. If I go, let's say, on top and I have this double diagonal, I can say no, I want a single one, or go back to double one. And why not having a better repetition, then more repetition for your bracing, then just play with the parameters. You see, just like that. Quite easy. And by the way, you have also some global parameters like the grid bracing reinforcement, and you see also no diagonal. And you can switch to a simple one. And on some location there, let me just go back to no diagonal, you see Lychee Slicer is adding extra bracing to give also more strength. Just look at inside of this square pattern. Let me switch to single one. You see you have a single bracing added in between, and of course if you go to double, this is extra bracing. Of course it will use more resin, but it will increase drastically the stability of your bracing and of course your support and your print. Then sometimes it's better to save some resin, let's say on supports, which are a better parenting for your support with a grid support, but spend, I would say, more resin to be sure your model is stable enough. Most of the time, just single diagonal can be great enough. Let me just go back to no diagonal. And one parameter, of course, you can do the same for middle and bottom. This is the same settings globally. Let me just go back to two settings. The first, reinforcement, and second, reinforcement. This is what I explained just before, you know, with this support, this big support there and small one. This is the distance from the ground where Lychee Slicer will add extra reinforcement to give more strength to your support. By default, as soon as a support is taller than 10 millimeters, it will add an extra reinforcement. And if the support is taller than 30, it will add another one, then 2 reinforcement. Of course, 10 millimeters and 30 millimeters, it's not tall enough. I would say go to, I don't know, 50 millimeters, then 5 centimeters to add a reinforcement, or perhaps smaller, perhaps go more to 50, 40, let's say like that. And a second one, let's say to 60 millimeters. Then if a support is smaller than 40 millimeters, no reinforcement, higher than 40 and between 40 and 60, just 1 reinforcement. And if it's taller than 60, then 2 reinforcement, what we just showed before. The problem is, in fact, in the bracing editor, you won't be able to see these parameters. You need to really generate your supports to see them. Then there is no preview for that. Just keep that in mind. And of course, you can save your preset like this one and applying to your model if you want right away. And you can see I applied. And like I said before, you see there, a reinforcement has been added at least on this support because it was taller and it was kind of alone to give more strength to your bracing with this new reinforcement. Just keep that in mind. There is one thing that I would like to let you know about the bracing and grid supports. That, remember a few minutes ago I explained that at any time you can change the density of your grid by editing this grid interval value, and then it will recompute your support. In fact, it will move all supports to the closest node and redo the parenting. Obviously, if you move all your support, you change the structure, the bracing won't be able to work anymore on this existing structure. That's why if you change the value, let's go from 5 to 6, Lychee Slicer will remove all the bracing. You just need to add or update your bracing and it's done. But just keep that in mind. But comes now something which can happen for, let's say, advanced users, perhaps like me, when you are creating, I don't know, some complex support. Sometimes you may want to create, I don't know, a mini support from this point and connecting this mini support to a bracing. And let me switch to my mini preset. Of course, now I guess you see what I will explain, that because it's connected to a bracing, if I update again my grid interval to a different value, the problem is that the bracing will disappear and all the support connected to this bracing will disappear at the same time, will be removed. And just keep a look there. Let me switch back to 6 to 5. Of course, it has been removed. Then you can update or creating, of course, the bracing like before, it's fine. But just keep in mind that if for some reason you think that later you will change the density of your grid support, try to create support which start from a support and not from a bracing. Most of the time you have your own habits about using a specific value. To be honest, on my end, it's been now a month that I'm using grid supports. I stay with 5 millimeters and never update to another value, but just keep that in mind. You just saw a few seconds ago that you can update the bracing and of course the supports and so on, but you have to know that you can update also a model which you created with the previous system for the supports, like this one. This is the original model. I spent quite some time creating support which go only to the ground. You see, very complex structure which go in between. Even the collision proximity system has been triggered, but it's working fine. Then I really like this challenge. You have mini supports everywhere and regular supports on the other locations. Then, as you can see, it's a lot of support there, quite dense. Then with the grid support, you can update everything. Let me just select all the supports like that. And I will just keep the one I created manually. You see there, because I want to be off the grid for this one. Because they are very well organized and having a good structure. And what I want to update, it's all these other regular supports. And notice that some of these supports, remember a few seconds ago I mentioned about the mini support, they are starting directly from the support and not the bracing, because I did the bracing just at the end of my preparation. Anyway, what I can do is going in structure, enabling the grid support, and now I need to explain, to tell to Lychee Slicer, please now convert these regular support to grid supports. This is easy, same as before. Right click, recalculate supports, and you see all the support have been updated. And Lychee Slicer let you know that, oh, you changed totally from the original structure to the new structure, and 6,000 bracing have been deleted. Click OK. They are still selected. My original support still there, including all the mini support, the fan support I did before. I just need to click on Add Bracing. Bracing has been added, just 1,400, which is less than before. And now it's done. I can print right away. Then this is very easy to update from the previous system to the new system. Just a selection, recalculate, of course, by enabling first the grid support system, and it's done. And as you can see, you can mix both regular support and grid support, updating only the one that you are selecting, which gives you a lot of freedom and flexibility in preparing your support with Lychee Slicer. Now I think that you have hopefully a good overview and knowledge about the grid support and this new bracing system in Lychee Slicer. You can see on this model that I prepared now quite some time ago. Of course, I have access to the application, it's been a while, from 3D Sculpt, very nice model, multiple parts. There is other part which is not on this plate, and everything has been made with grid supports, and the print is just flawless. Of course, the print itself, the model is very nice, but there is no deformation. All the assembly for everything is done perfectly. That's why grid support are really powerful. And on top of that, I have less support than before, less resin usage. It's easier to understand what is happening. Then there is only benefit to use the grid support. Then try with some simple model just to understand the weight working, to see the grid density. Don't forget that sometimes we think that, oh, the grid density is too high or too small, but you are in a virtual world right now. Then feel free to switch to the export section and using the add scale button to have a better understanding of the density of support that you have. If you want to play with a smaller and higher value, like I said a few seconds ago, or use a simulator, or use even better the physical scale size mode, you just need to measure the distance of this small line with a ruler, setting the value, and you will have the exact size on your screen of your print. Then you can estimate also if the density of the support and bracing will be good for you or not. Then just keep that in mind. And about all the bracing parameters, you see, if you enter in the editor, it can be a lot. Just play with some setting, create, like I did, a demo or just kind of temporary preset and play with the values, or just keep the default preset. It will working fine with almost everything. Play with that. Don't forget that you can recalculate your old support to the new system, or if for some reason you started with the old system and you switch to the grid mode, you need to recalculate your support to tell Lychee Slicer, oh, these supports now are in grid mode, because if you don't do that, they will just stay outside of the system, of the grid system. Then just keep that in mind, but play with it. Trust me, as soon as you start to play with that, you may not have go back to the old system, except for small, I would say, support. If you want to have something straight, and again, you have the right click and you can make pillar or make vertical your support for some specific need. Then mix also the best of both worlds. Anyway, thank you very much to be with me until the end. I hope you learned things about Lychee Slicer in this video. Let me know in comments if you have questions about that. Feel free to let me know if this video are useful to you, if my French accent is fine for your ears, and then be creative, which is the most important, and see you later in future video of Lychee Slicer and perhaps other stuff around creative products or creative project, which is what I love the most. See you later, bye bye.